Hello everyone, I'm Angelo. I'm out here in my field of wisdom. I want to say first, I learned that Penny Marshall died today, the great director and actress. I'm sorry to hear that. She was 75. Directed some great movies. Big, which I saw many times as a kid. A League of Their Own, which I've seen several times. She was on Laverne and Shirley, which I didn't see much of. But anyways, that's sad. Sorry she's gone. Grateful for all she had and all she gave. Also, my mom is not on time today to do a video, so I'm doing this one now. I want to talk about how I stopped being a conservative. It's a topic I've thought about for a long time. Thought about making a video, wasn't sure what to say. Now, I grew up being strongly right-wing conservative. It was never something I was overtly told to be necessarily. I could always, think whatever I wanted. But it was something that was kind of so omnipresent, the conservative outlook, the right-wing outlook, that it was kind of invisible. It was like everywhere. It was like just like the light, coming from the sun now, it's over everything, so it's like you don't even notice it. In a way, you only notice more if there's contrast. There is contrast. You see the shadow here and then light on my face. But it was just kind of everywhere, the messaging. I didn't really think, there was anything else to consider as far as conservative views on welfare, taxes, abortion, gay rights. Sorry to say I was like that, but at the same time, it's how I became who I am. So I had to outgrow all that. And I grew up strongly believing that, and with time, I came to much more strongly believe that. So I read Rush Limbaugh's books, a book from Sean Hannity, Larry Elder, Tammy Bruce, a bunch of others. I don't even remember. Tucker Carlson, Rich Lowry, Bernard Goldberg. I read a lot of conservative pundits and authors. I listened to their shows. I listened to Laura Ingraham. I used to watch Bill O'Reilly. I could never get into his books. Even when I was a fan of his, I could not read his books. They weren't that good. And many others, and I had different shifts and turns over the years, but I held on to those views for a long time, up till kind of my early 20s. I'm 33 now, and then I sort of drifted away and didn't really care or give much thought. I was like, I don't have the energy to care about that stuff. But I realize now, seeing it, that I always had these latent conservative beliefs. And, prejudiced views and bigoted views. And it's always something I try and inform myself of. So I became strongly conservative first. Just a lot of the messaging around me was kind of all-encompassing as pro-military, pro-cop. Cops were always the good guys, right-wing. America always makes war on the right side. Every war America, is fighting a righteous cause for. America doesn't do dirty wars. And bigotry and discrimination have been done away with. Fortunately, that was a long time ago now. Everybody's got an equal chance of success in America, and if you don't take advantage of that, it was your fault because you didn't work hard enough and you were lazy. And that's what I really believed. I believed poor people deserved what they got. And that people who called for, racial equality and gender equality, they were... Again, this is the messaging I heard all the time, those background, that when I would hear it directly from pundits, I'm like, that's exactly right. Which is that they were harping on identity politics, and that they were just trying to attack white men, and that they just had irrational anger. It's still something they talk about. Rush Limbaugh talked about it decades ago. He talks about it now. I still listen to right-wingers to be informed, and it's like a grotesque, like a perverse pleasure for me to hear, well, what are they talking about now? I want to be informed on it. And it's a little cold out here. I'm shivering. So Rush Limbaugh will still say Trump derangement system. Trump derangement syndrome. And other pundits will say that too, just this deranged, irrational anger. That's exactly what I said about George Bush. People were irrationally angry about him. Because, of course, if you're in a conservative bubble, you don't think at all in terms of other people's experiences being real and legitimate. So you don't think in terms of women's experiences, LGBTQ people. That is especially looked down upon by a lot of conservatives. Black people, poor people, Native Americans, Arabs, people in other countries who are, the victims of American policies. Both are corporate governance around the world, colonialism, and war. That's 3 things. Excuse me. And Hispanic immigrants, but immigrants from lots of countries, but Hispanic immigrants in particular, and ignoring, what happened in those countries that America perpetrated, in many of them, in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Chile. And so what caused this change? I'll kind of go quick, because I was I was really into this for a while. I was this chauvinist jerk, that I wasn't a bad person per se, but I deserved to be called a bad person. I'll say that. Because I had these negative, self-centered views about people. I were literally I was just so condescending about, well, if you're homeless, stop being homeless and just get a job, get 2 jobs. I didn't realize how ridiculous and absurd that is, how it's set up to be nearly impossible for a lot of homeless people. Anyway, I won't get into all justifying those views now. I'll just say what happened to make me change. First, it was little things I always had a little bit, this tendency to want to prove myself wrong, to see if I'm wrong somewhere. And I would just listen slowly to other voices. The internet helped change that. I would listen and hear other people talk, and I'd be like, after the change was imperceptible day to day, but after a few months, I'd be like, I have a slightly different, more expanded perspective on life. Just hearing from people who have struggled with drugs, who have struggled with bad relationships, who have, had bad experiences with police. Another thing that kind of helped, just hearing humor that let out a perspective of how, people's experiences with racial discrimination manifest. So Dave Chappelle, helped me just be able to be okay with I understand there are racist cops out there, and that's nothing a lot of white people act intimidated when you say that there's racist policing and systemic racism. They're like, well, you hate white people, you hate me. But that was a way for me to hear that and at least have this corner of my mind where I thought, no, that's not an attack on me. That's something we should all join in and be against. But still, I was conservative. Slowly over the years, expanding my perspective, hearing other people, also drifting away from religion in college, that helped. Because I was firmly against gay marriage, but I had no real reason for it. I did not personally feel any animosity towards gay people. Now, a lot of people who are against gay marriage will say that, but it was for me, I didn't understand really, I say I was religious, but really I was an atheist the whole time. It just, I couldn't admit it to myself, because it was the simplest thing to admit that to myself finally when I had gotten out of high school. Because I realized the whole time, I was saying to myself that, I was religious and it's important to be religious, and Democrats and liberals are atheists. What I was saying to myself was, I'm religious because it's the right thing to do, and that's it. And that makes you a good person. And if God wants you to do this or that, then that's what you got to do. Strangely, a view very much like the extremist Islam, like Taliban and Al-Qaeda conservatives here have, against gays, against sexual expression, against healthy views on drugs, on relationships, on gender relations. But anyway, so abortion was another one that I just didn't understand any other perspective. And that was how, was kind of taught to us over and over in schools. Ugly conservative views on transgender people. We were never taught that like a transgender person is real or valid. In Catholic schools, this is what we were taught. That I won't even repeat what they said. Is basically, the views that they teach. I don't have to give voice to them. But I didn't know any transgender people. I never met anyone I never listened to anybody like that. I thought, well, it's not even really real. Seeing movies are a big part of this, in a sense that I could just see other aspects of life that I would have never given any consideration to. Hey, Roger Ebert, great movie critic, said movies are like empathy machines. They really are. I think maybe the first transgender person I became aware of, I may have seen some early, but that I was aware of was portrayed in Dog Day Afternoon. It was very, a movie about a bank robbery, and but it's based on real events, and very troubled characters. But that's also, you're meant to empathize with these characters too, and it's not representative of every transgender person, but just being able to see someone and have their humanity regarded opened up this view for me a little bit at a time, like turning a crank and just opening up a little bit more. It's not like I'm the most, knowledgeable person now, but I try know that I need to be able to listen and not be so chauvinistic, which is what, as a conservative, I was proud to be, is like tell people what I think, what they need to know. Okay, I got to hurry this along. What happened over the next several years was just the experience of going out, of meeting people, being in different places where I could hear viewpoints where it didn't feel like any threat or challenge to my views, which is what a lot of conservatives feel when they see it, from the safety of their computer screens or their phones, and just see, reality, basically, hear perspectives that I didn't think of before. I heard a woman from Iraq talk about the consequences of the war. Their family members got killed in bombs there. I saw, I worked with an entertainment agency. It was kind of like a fashion agency. For 2 years, I did videos for them. It was a primarily black organization that worked with black women's hair and like all kinds of issues I had no clue existed. Like that there's a need for, first of all, that black people are basically taught to not like the color of their skin by, the majority white population. Not every white person one-on-one, but it's a system that we kind of uphold of saying, well, here's what blackness is, and if you're this, you're bad, and also we're going to try and make you poor with redlining, with segregation that's not necessarily, it's not Jim Crow anymore, but it's de facto segregation of pushing black people in poor neighborhoods, of brutalizing them with the police, disparate drug sentencing laws, disparate treatment with bail bonds, all kinds of problems like that, inflicting those problems on them and then teaching them, well, it's because of you and blaming them for the problems perpetrated upon them by white supremacy for hundreds of years. So being in this black entertainment agency, I wasn't like thinking anything politically, I was just hanging out, but they did a lot of charitable work, a lot of things like giving away clothes to people, of doing shows where it was like inclusive of all different body types, senior citizens, like all different looks, and when you just have to regard someone's humanity, it's hard to hate them up close. It's not the cure-all for everybody, but it just made me like be aware of things I didn't know. When they did a show, and part of the show that I was filming, there was a section like in dedication to Trayvon Martin. Well, this is how ignorant I was at the time. I literally didn't know who Trayvon Martin was. You see, by this time I wasn't really conservative, like actively conservative. I was just kind of like stayed away from politics. But when I did that, I was kind of defaulting to conservatism, to being unaware, being unaware of what, powerful institutions and the police and corporate governance are doing to poor people of color. And so it was kind of like defaulting. It was like defaulting to being deferential to white corporate power and white systemic racism in government. So I didn't even know what that was. So, and it took a while to learn, like, well, to unlearn a lot of what I knew and sort of learn a lot of new things. I'm still always learning. And stuff like being on Twitter just completely opened up my perspective to, like, things I didn't know. And by no means do I know everything about this stuff. It's why I just think it's good to listen about, like, how transgender people live. And there's no one transgender life. There's many different stories about how genderqueer people who also may be transgender if they don't identify the gender they were assigned at birth. All kinds of different lives. Black civil rights activists, immigrant activists, all kinds of stuff I didn't know about it. When I was in high school, this is to give you a perspective of how much of a conservative bubble I grew up in. When I heard about Al Jazeera, I didn't know about the news network. Al Jazeera, I think it was after 9/11, some point, I heard Sean Hannity talk about it. And as soon as I heard that, and I heard Sean Hannity talk about it, criticize them, basically saying they're pro-Al-Qaeda, I immediately assumed it was a pro-Al-Qaeda, pro-terrorist news organization. It's not at all. It's a legitimate news organization. And what Sean Hannity was so upset about, and what people like me, what I believed in, was that, they must be in support of terrorism and Al-Qaeda because they hate America. Because if you're going to report on stuff that supposedly, like, we don't report here, it's not because American reporters are, so Anglo-centric and American-centric and nationalistic and ignorant of the suffering we inflict on other countries. No, it's because this news organization must hate America and hates the war on terror, the war in Afghanistan, and later the war in Iraq. It's just because they hate America. That's why they're trying to attack America. That's how delicate my sense, of white identity was as an American. Was just, if you criticize our war, it's because you're against all of us, you hate us. And so anyways, after hearing a lot of perspectives, learning a lot about how different people live, and I'm still learning, there's still new things I process, and I learned also just the value of being quiet and listening to people. There's nothing like anti, me or anybody else. Just by listening to someone else, it's empowering. I realized, there's so many perspectives and so much, inequity and pain and exploitation that I don't even know about, and I still don't know about, and many of us still don't know about, and that doesn't get reported. But we're taught in the news, the way the news portrays people is if you have a suit, if you have an expensive haircut, if you speak with clear, diction, then your voice is worth hearing. And if you're poor, if you're uneducated, if you're victimized, if you're marginalized, if you've been to jail, then your voice is not worth you're not news. The news is people who look good, who are dressed well, and who make millions of dollars. The news is not someone, who may be, going through the worst time of their life. Well, how is that not news? Are they no less human than anyone else? Excuse me, I gotta wipe my nose. But is their experience no less valid? Well, we're taught that all the time. Just never explicitly, or not never explicitly. Many times it's not explicit. It's just an implicit bias we have. So anyways, story of me stopping being conservative was just hearing other perspectives, seeing more of life, learning about other people. What I am now is something I never in a million years thought I'd be. I guarantee if I had seen a glimpse of what I am doing now when I was 18, I would have been so hurt and offended and upset thinking, what the hell has Angelo become? I'm like, no. I would have been like, no, there's no way I'll become this. But now I'm glad for that. I'm glad I went through that change. I don't see how I could, have a conscience and want to be any other way. And how I could not accept other people's experiences as valid. So anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. Try and hear someone else's perspective. Watch a documentary on Black Lives Matter and community activists. which so many conservatives go to downvote before they even watch the video and leave comments saying, well, what about Chicago? What about the black on black crime? But in the same documentary, this was a Journeyman documentary, their YouTube channel, their company that produces documentaries, they had a whole section on community activists, including Spike Lee, who went to Chicago and helped after-school programs for kids. So, they'd, have respect for themselves and wouldn't want to, don't end up doing things that waste their time and demean their own lives. But they pretend like that doesn't happen. And so they're clearly eager to take in this right-wing propaganda that I was eager to take in as well. So watch a documentary, read some articles, follow someone on Twitter, get a different perspective. And thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.